Good evening and a warm welcome to our third seminar on an extremely important topic of lockdown and its effects, especially on finances of MSMEs. Today we have with us Advocate Manoj Harit, who will explain what are the changes in the Npa guidelines and bankruptcy rules. But before we begin the session, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce Moneylife Foundation. We are a 10-year-old NGO, and our primary goal is to educate citizens and to help them become financially literate while also taking up matters that affect consumers and savers. Our speaker today, Mr. Harit, practices at the Bombay High Court, and his firm specializes in helping businesses to deal with the various recovery options, especially with the DRT. Advocate Harit was an entrepreneur himself and ran a textile mill unit at Malegaon, so he understands what it takes to be an MSME unit. At present, he is engaged in horticulture at his town, Malegaon, while continuing to practice law in Mumbai. Now, without taking too much of time, I just wanted to share a few rules for the session today. We have kept everybody on mute during the session for the benefit of all involved, and will unmute you during the question and answer session. For optimal viewing, we'd request everybody to keep the webinar on speaker view mode. And this meeting will be is recorded and uploaded on our YouTube channel, that is youtube.com/MoneyLiveTV. During the question and answer, please use the raise hands button available in Zoom if you wish to ask any question. You can ask question in English, Hindi, or Marathi. Some of you have sent us some information on these MSME issues, but Mr. Harit will take the generic questions and not the specific cases that you might want to ask him. Over to you, Mr. Harit.
Thank you, Yogesh, for handing over the floor to me. Thanks, Suchita ma'am. I thank Devashish sir, Moneylife, all of you who are doing extremely important work, which involves educating the people. Educating the people about their rights, educating the people about what they can demand as a right. And I feel it an honor to share this particular event. Now, everybody would agree that these are not the best of the times for anybody. I mean, in my 4.5 decade of life, I have never seen times more uncertain than what we are seeing today. The times were not so good even before the pandemic struck us, especially for the business community, especially for the MSME entrepreneurs. The times were not good, but the effect of the pandemic is severe, it is harsh, it is, as on this date, as this evening when we are speaking, it is beyond comprehension for us, for entrepreneurs, for the policy makers, and even for the bankers, or for that matter, our Honorable Reserve Bank Governor. Everybody is hoping against hope that the damage this particular pandemic causes to the business community would not be as severe as it looks today, or as it looked a week back. In this scenario, of course, we all are entrepreneurs, you all are entrepreneurs, you all have it in you to set up and run an industry. In my earlier talks, I have spoken at length about what it takes to set up a MSME unit, what are the difficulties, what are the problems faced by the MSME entrepreneurs. I'm not going to go back over there. You can check that particular part of my talk on YouTube, on the Moneylife YouTube channel, if you want. Today, there are uncertainties with respect to the policy, uncertainties with respect to your business environment, uncertainties even with respect to whether your unit would be running tomorrow or day after tomorrow or not. Because maybe I finish this talk and on your WhatsApp, you'll get a notification or a message from your local district administration, whether it is a municipal commissioner, whether it is a SDO, or whether it is a district collector, saying that the COVID cases have gone up and the particular area or this particular area would be put under a lockdown. How uncertain could the times be? Therefore, this endeavor is, today's talk is to make at least one part of an entrepreneur's life a little bit uncertain, which is your loan account, with respect to classification of NPA and with respect to the changes that have been brought in prior to the pandemic also and after the pandemic also. There are various measures initiated by Government of India, initiated by Reserve Bank of India to alleviate the difficulties and the hardships which the MSMEs are facing. It is not our matter of discussion whether those measures are adequate or inadequate. That's a debate for some other forum, not this. But we must acknowledge there have been certain policies, guidelines, which are really welcome, both from the government as well as from the Reserve Bank of India, as far as helping the MSMEs to tide over this particular period of uncertainty is concerned. Now, the first and foremost is the limit of MSME have already been revised by the government, and that's a good move. Right now, investment in plant and machinery and equipment, if it is up to 1 crore and the turnover is up to 5 crore, then the unit is known as a micro unit. Similarly, for a small unit, the limits have been raised to 10 crore and 50 crore of a turnover, a 10 crore of investment. And for medium, it is 50 crore of investment and 250 crores in the turnover. You would think, how does it affect me as an MSME entrepreneur? It does. Every sector has specific schemes from the government, specific benefits from the Reserve Bank of India. Supposing you are in the micro sector, then there is a scheme under CGTSME which mandates the bankers to provide collateral-free loans to you. So all these reclassifications of MSME in terms of higher investment and higher turnover is an important step. It will help the MSMEs. And similarly, the government of India has come out with the 3 lakh crore MSME credit package. How does that work? Almost everybody by this time may be aware of it. If not, I'll just discuss briefly. The scheme is, as on 29th February 2020, whatever are your credit outstandings, the bank will extend a 20% additional liquidity to you, 20% additional credit facility to you without asking for any further increase in the collateral security or any further guarantee documents to be signed. And this balance, as on 29th February 2020, it could be a balance which is within 60 days of past due. What does that mean? In simple words, even if your MSME unit has not been able to pay the interest that was applied by your bank on 31st of January 2020 and 29th of February 2020, even then you are eligible to get the 20% extra credit from your banker. Now, everybody should please note this down and demand from your banker that, because it has come to my knowledge, a lot of people have spoken to me about it, that even if the interest and repayment is not done of the interest applied on 29th of February, a lot of bankers are refusing to sanction or extend this additional 20% credit. Remember, this is your right. You must go to your banker and you must demand this 20% additional credit if it has not already been granted to you. I think most of the bankers have already extended this credit. Why? Because there's nothing for the banker to lose in this. Because the entire amount is 100% backed, guaranteed by Government of India. So most of the bankers are taking recourse to this. Even non-banking finance companies are trying to raise money from the banks to extend this particular 20% credit to their customers. So as I think there should not be much of a problem over here. And even if it is there, as I said you, please go to the banker, speak to him and demand, because this is your right. Now, I'll come to the main topic of Npa classification. Before I move on to the changes which have been brought in the recent past in classification of Npa by Reserve Bank of India through various of its guidelines, it becomes imperative to first speak about Npa. What exactly is Npa? Everybody knows that it is non-performing asset. In a very simple term, it means that an asset or a lease account which has ceased to generate money for the bank. That's a very simple definition of Npa. Now, what and why of the Npa are also important. Why it becomes imperative for a bank, or it becomes imperative for Reserve Bank of India to lay down these Npa guidelines through master circulars for every banker. If you see the currently operative master circular of Reserve Bank of India dated 1st of July 2015, it is a comprehensive document. It gives all the minor details which would empower a banker to classify a loan account exactly as per the Reserve Bank of India guidelines. Are the bankers doing it? Have the bankers understood this particular circular? Do the bankers follow this particular circular or other circulars issued from time to time by Reserve Bank of India? The answer is no. I think most of you would agree with me on this point. I'll go a step further. Do the tribunals like a debt recovery tribunal, or say National Company, NCLT, National Companies Law Tribunal, which is mandated to handle the matters under IBC code, or a debt recovery tribunal which handles the cases under the RDDB Act and the SURFACI Act, or the judiciary in general, whether everybody is on the same page with respect to what constitutes an Npa? The answer, unfortunately, is no. This is really disturbing. Why it is disturbing is when the guidelines are in black and white, when Reserve Bank of India has been coming out with these guidelines from way back from 2-3 decades, why is there so much misunderstanding about the concept of Npa? The reason is there is no mechanism through which a wrongful classification of Npa can be brought to the notice of a banker and make it compulsory for the banker to deal with the issue. Because if you bring it to the knowledge of the banker would simply kick the can down the road. He'll say, okay, we have done it right. If you have issues, go to the appropriate court or the tribunal. He doesn't look at it. Similarly, when you try and go and explain or try and make this point before or yes, am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So the problem with the system right now is when an entrepreneur whose account has been wrongfully classified as NPA approaches the Honorable Debt Recovery Tribunal or other judicial forums, including the high courts, the focus of the court is on the recovery part of it. The court says, all right, we agree, we will look into what you are saying, but how much is your amount outstanding? You say 100 rupees. Okay, how much are you willing to deposit right now? So that's the approach. If you say, okay, I'll deposit 50 rupees, I'll deposit 25 rupees, only then at a future point in time, not at that particular point of time when you're depositing the money, at a future point of time, you may get a chance to put these facts before the appropriate tribunal or the appropriate court. Being the system this skewed against the MSME entrepreneur, it becomes vitally important for each and every entrepreneur to know what exactly is the concept of NPA. To start with, I'll go to the very first circular from Reserve Bank of India, which is a master circular dated 1st of July 2015. Now I'm sharing the circular with you just to highlight a few points in this. And this further underlines what I just said, that I find it vitally important to explain or talk about a circular of July 2015 in August 2020. That itself underlines the misinformation that is all pervading as regards to these circulars. Now, what the Reserve Bank of India circular says, as I told you, an asset, including a leased asset, becomes a non-performing when it ceases to generate income for the bank. Fine. Next is, it is a a non-performing asset is a loan or an advance where an asset, including a lease assets, yes, interest or installment of principal remains overdue for a period of more than 90 days in respect of a term loan, and the account remains out of order as indicated at para 2.2 below in respect of an overdraft cash credit ODCC account. I'll come to out of order later. First, let us concentrate on the very first thing. Interest and or installment of principal remain overdue for a period of more than 90 days in respect of a term loan. Now, the words are simple. There is no ambiguity in the words. Then how do the bankers make a mistake while classification of the loan account? I'll come to that also in a bit of a moment. So basically what everybody knows and the common understanding which is accepted by everybody is, if for a period of 90 days, interest and installment is not paid, the loan account would be treated as NPA on the 91st day. Similarly, for a OD account or a CC account, if the account remains out of order for a period of 90 days or more, then the account is liable to be classified as non-performing asset. Then some facilities which remain outstanding for more than 90 days. So 90 days is the 90 days is the underlying theme. The out of order status. What is out of order? An account should be treated as out of order if the outstanding balance remains continuously in excess of the drawing limit, drawing power or the limit for a period of 90 days. Again, 90 days. So the underlying theme is 90 days. Everybody knows that, okay, if 90 days due would make your account as NPA. What everybody forgets is, look at 2.1.3 in this screen. In case of interest payments, bank should classify an account as NPA only if the interest due and charged during any quarter is not serviced fully within 90 days from the end of the quarter. A lot of people, a lot of bankers give a go by to this. What does it mean in simple terms? In simple terms is, on interest applied by your bank to your loan account on 31st January 2020, if it remains unpaid on 1st of June 2020, then only it can be classified as NPA. As per the common understanding of 90 days, the loan account would be classified as NPA after a period of 90 days, that is on 1st of May. It becomes liable to be classified as NPA on 1st of May as per the common understanding. That's not the case. 2.1.3 says that the loan of 90 days after the end of the quarter in which it was charged. So interest debited on 31st January 2020 is charged in a quarter ending March 2020. So 90 days from the end of the quarter, which is 90 days from 31st of March 2020, would be the time when your banker can classify the account as NPA. He cannot classify it as NPA in May nor in June, because the Reserve Bank of India guideline provides you the facility to make the payment of interest debited at the end of January by 1st of July without the account being classified as NPA. This particular part, this particular aspect is really not appreciated by the bankers, which I request them to do. Every time I meet a banker friend, every time I go to some seminar where I meet bankers, I tell them that please pay attention to this particular provision. It still stands in the master circular. You are still bound to follow this. And more up, unfortunately, other than a very few decisions of a few high courts across India, Kolkata High Court, 1 or 2 in Bombay High Court and Madras High Court, not many judgments on this particular issue. There are, because not many people take this issue to the High Court. I'm coming to that in a bit. Right now, we are onto the Npa classifications. Now, after this particular 1st July 2015 notification, this still holds good. This is the parameter. These are the guidelines to which the banker should conform to before classification of your account as NPA. The first change in these guidelines in this particular circular was brought by Reserve Bank of India on 7th February 2018. What the Reserve Bank of India did with this is, this 90-day norm was extended to 180 days only for the benefit of MSME account. This was not available to other sectors. It was only for MSME sector. There were certain criteria which you need to adhere to or match to be eligible for this particular leniency in NPA classification. The first one is your unit has to be GST registered. Second is the exposure should not be more than 25 crore as on 31st of January 2018. Then the next was the borrower's account should have been standard as on 31st August 2017. Now, please, I'm pausing here for a moment. Please write this down for the simple reason that please check your bank accounts, see whether your accounts were standard as on August 31, 2017. Why did the Reserve Bank of India come out with a circular in February of 2018 by changing the norms of NPA classification from August 31, 2017? Because the advent and introduction of goods and services tax had hit the liquidity of MSME units. It hit the business cycle of the MSME units. That's the reason. I mean, it took the Reserve Bank of India 6 months to acknowledge that the MSME sector is under deep distress because entire calculations with respect to the working capital have gone haywire. All the working capital sanctions to MSMEs were based on certain formulas, and those formulas did not take into account the introduction of GST and the disruptions caused by it in the business cycle. So by this particular circular notification, the Reserve Bank of India made the 90-day norm as 180-day norm. So it was to alleviate the liquidity problems and to allow breathing space to MSME units. Unfortunately, the 7th February 2018 circular is not implemented by many of the bankers, and that is causing tremendous harassment to MSME units. So I would request all the MSME units to take a copy of this and please speak to your banker, look at your books, speak to your chartered accountant, ask him whether your account was standard on that particular date. Spend some time on your books, spend some time with your banker, spend some time with your chartered accountant, understand where your loan account stands. This particular circular, after this, Reserve Bank of India thought that, okay, even non-MSME units would require this particular and non-GST registered units, MSME units, would also require this protection because even they are suffering. So that classification or the differentiation made for GST registered units was done away with by this particular circular, and it became applicable and available to all the MSME borrowers. Right? Then we have seen in February 2018, Reserve Bank of India comes up and increases the 90-day period to 180 days for MSME. In June, it extends it to the MSME which were not even registered. But the distress in MSME was so deep rooted that both these measures were not enough. The MSME units were not able to repay or service their interest even in a window of 180 days. The Reserve Bank of India rightly took note of this particular situation, and on 1/1/2019 they came out with a restructuring of advances guidelines. Now, what were the key decisions of these restructuring guidelines? One time a classification, a one-time restructuring was allowed by this particular circular without downgrading in the asset classification, which is, even if your account is restructured, it will not be classified as NPA, and the banker would not be prevented from taking up the restructuring exercise for the fear of turning or being mandatorily classifying your account as NPA. So his apprehension that my NPAs would increase was taken care of by this particular structure notification with respect to restructuring. Now again, here there were certain conditions. The first one was 25 crore of the turnover, and the account should have been standard on August 31, 2017. Again, look which accounts were eligible for restructuring. The accounts that were standard on 31st August 2017. Again, the significance of the date. July 2017, GST was implemented. So if an MSME unit was a standard account and making payment of its installments and interest to the bank till GST was introduced, the MSME was held to be eligible for restructuring. And of course, it had to be registered on the date of restructuring, registered under the GST regime. And this particular circular, it mandated that this exercise is to be carried out before 31/3/2020. Pause for a moment, give it a thought. A circular dated 1st of January 2019 gives bankers 15 months for restructuring. You may think that 15 months is a pretty long time. It is not, because restructuring is an exercise where the banker requires sufficient time. It requires huge amount of resources also on the part of the banker. And it is an exercise which is done holistically, taking into consideration a whole lot of factors. And most of the factors, most of the ratios, everything was to be devised by individual banks and uploaded on their website or displayed in their branches. This particular circular, every Reserve Bank of India circular, at the end of the circular, the Reserve Bank of India puts the onus on the board of the bank, whether it is a public sector bank, whether it is a private bank, or it is a non-banking finance company. The onus is on the directors and the boards and the managing director or the chairman to formulate the guidelines in accordance with the Reserve Bank of India notifications and put those guidelines on the notice board of your branches or your website. Not many banks do it. Some banks do it with a delay. A lot of banks do it in a manner that it is not given wide publicity. So people more or less remain unaware about it. I'm sure most of the MSME manufacturers, MSME unit entrepreneurs would not be aware that this particular scheme, they could have gone to the banker and demanded implementation of this. Now, next, again, even after this particular scheme, you remember the earlier restructuring scheme was valid only up to 31st of March 2020. So on 11th of February 2020, the Reserve Bank thought it fit to come out with a fresh notification with respect to restructuring of advances. Now, again, one-time restructuring was allowed over here. Why? 11 to 2020, it is not after the COVID pandemic. It is much before the COVID pandemic. So 1/1/2019, Reserve Bank of India granted a window of restructuring. Not many accounts were restructured due to various factors which I just alluded to, which is a lack of information with the borrowers or a lack of enthusiasm on the part of the bankers, and etc. etc. So Reserve Bank had to come out with this notification again on 11th of February 2020. So here the Reserve Bank is conscious of the fact that MSME sector still requires help. It still requires restructuring. This particular circular talks again about 25 crore should not be there, and here the eligibility is based upon the account being standard on 1/1/2020. So, and the GST registration and all that, and this restructuring, Reserve Bank of India has mandated to be carried out by 31/12/2020. So this particular scheme is still going on. Please have a look at it. Please study the scheme. Talk to your CA, talk to your lawyer, ask him the details, nitty-gritty about it. Speak to your banker, and please try and see if you fit into this. This is important. Your account will not be downgraded. It will not be classified as NPA just because of this restructuring. Now, there is a Reserve Bank of India notification dated 23/3/2020. Now, this particular circular is known to everybody. Every newspaper carried it, and this is known to everybody. Just a second. Yes. So again, this no, we are on 11/2. The next one. I'm sorry. So all the banks and financial institutions were permitted to grant a moratorium of 3 months on payment of all the installments and interest payments falling due between March 1 and May 31. So this moratorium circular, everybody knows, all the financial papers, local newspapers, everybody covered it properly. Even the politicians spoke about it at length, because this is something which appeals and applies to a whole section of society. Now here, again, there is a nuance in this. The nuance is this, that this moratorium of 3 months is for payments falling due between March 1, 2020. What does it mean? It means even if you have not made the payment of February, still you are eligible for this moratorium. It has been brought to my notice by many clients and many friends that bankers are not granting the moratorium even if interest for the month of February has been paid. They say that you'll have to clear up the interest for the month of March 2020. March 2020, if you want to be eligible for the moratorium, which is a completely misconceived view of this notification. And I'm really sorry to share with you that many of the foreign banks are also insisting that, okay, the March interest also have to be paid. Not only February, you have to pay the March interest also, because they are taking this circular as the payment becoming due after the lockdown, which is not the case. This particular notification is absolutely clear. So even if you have not paid an interest for the month of February, interest or installment for the month of February 2020, you are eligible for the moratorium. Now this moratorium, as we all know, has further been extended by 3 months, and it has been made applicable till 31st August 2020. As of now, we don't have any information whether this would be extended any further, so I would not venture any guess on that particular aspects. Now, I have come to this particular point, which is August 2020. Assuming that all of you are enjoying this moratorium, August 31, 2020 becomes very important for you, because if the moratorium is not extended, by next 3 months, you are looking at NPA classification. Now, NPA classification, even though they were brought in by Reserve Bank of India to have a control over the workings of the bank, so that the banks would not hide non-performing assets which had stopped generating income for the bank, and still they were not disclosed in the balance sheet. So this 90-day norm was adopted as per the Basel norms. This is the norm adopted by advanced economies like Europe and USA. Everywhere this 90-day norm is followed. Why at the first speed breaker, which is GST, why Reserve Bank of India had to fall back on 180 days norm for India? Maybe 180-day norm is more suitable for India than the 90-day norms. Why 180-day norm was done away with due to the report submitted by the Narasimhan committee? Why it was done? Because a few large accounts were swept under the carpet after every cycle of 180 days. So evergreening was done. But what it has done to the small and medium industry borrower is it has affected him adversely. For him, the 90-day norm ought not to have been 180 days. So if there is an MSME unit which at the very first hurdle in its business cycle can't conform to your 90-day norm, and you have to extend that norm to 180 days, and that is still persisting. Even today, those norms are applicable. So for a period of 1.5 to 3 years, you have to follow that particular relaxed norm. Then you need a rethink over there. And even if that doesn't happen, that's a policy prerogative of Reserve Bank of India. That may not happen. For our purpose, for the purpose of the discussion today, what is important is do not let a banker classify your loan account as NPA in a wrongful manner. When that will happen if you are aware how and when the account can be classified as NPA. Take out your statement. After this talk, I would urge each one of you to please, if your account has been classified as NPA, please take out your statement of account, see on which date the account has been classified as NPA, and check it whether it is in accordance with the Reserve Bank of India guidelines or not. If it is not, then please don't let it go. Speak to the banker, write to the banker once, twice, third time, write to the Reserve Bank of India. I know nothing will happen, but then you earn a right to approach the Honorable High Court of your particular state. Approach the High Court, tell the Honorable High Court that look, this particular public sector bank has wrongfully classified my account as NPA, because for an MSME unit, the stamp of NPA means a virtual coma. That's not the case with many other accounts or many other borrowers. But for the MSME, what happens? The very first thing that happens is the CC account or the OD account. That account, whatever credits that come in that account, the banker retains those credits. The MSME borrower is not allowed to withdraw or use that money. It means either he'll have to open a new account in a new bank, which then makes him liable to be classified or declared as a willful defaulter, because there is a rule that you cannot open and operate an account with any other bank than your financer. Secondly, if he has not opened an account with some other bank, what he tries to do is he tries to route his transactions directly between his supplier and buyer. He makes a request to the supplier that, okay, instead of making the payment to me, please make the payment directly to my supplier. So it's called a hawala entry in business. That's perfectly legal as far as income tax is concerned. So don't mistake it for the hawala which is used in the money laundering terms. So that's not this hawala. Secondly, what it does is he goes to his chartered accountant. The chartered accountant then maybe advises, or some other consultants, they advise him that, okay, you approach an NBFC, right, and you avail of some loan from the NBFC and repay the excess amount or the overdue amount in your CC, and then maybe you can run your business properly. Now, going to an NBFC in a moment of financial crunch or financial difficulty is a mistake which no entrepreneur should ever make. I'm not saying don't go to NBFC and borrow from them. I'm not saying that. Go to an NBFC and borrow from them only for the purpose of your business and not for making payment of the due installments or the interest of your regular banker. Don't do that. Borrow from the NBFC if it is required for the purpose of your business, because what you have basically is a profit generating unit. So you as an entrepreneur are required to do everything to maintain the nature of your asset, the nature of your business, the nature of your industry remain the same, which is profit generating unit. You can borrow only for that specific purpose, to maintain its profitability and not to pay or repay the unpaid amounts to your main banker. Don't do that mistake, because it never stops with one NBFC. Because if you borrow from one NBFC, pay to your banker, in some time, in a month or two, this NBFC account becomes overdue. Then you borrow from a second NBFC to repay first NBFC as well as your original banker. So this cycle goes on. Don't get onto this cycle. This cycle has a very disastrous result. Now I'll come back to the present situation, that this yes. So as per the last classification notification, even if there is an asset downgrade, I mean, this is intrinsically related to the classification of NPA account. Can a banker straight away classify your account as NPA without going through these three classifications of special mention accounts? That you should confront, that is a question which you should confront your banker with, because it is a duty of the banker to classify this particular any particular account as non-performing asset strictly in accordance with the Reserve Bank of India guidelines. Now there is 17th April 2020 COVID regulatory asset classification provisioning. Now these are also important. What it says are standard account as on February 29, 2020, even if overdue, the moratorium period whichever is granted shall be excluded by lending institution from the number of days past due for the purpose of asset classification under the IRAC norm. What does it mean in simple language? In simple language, it means that after 31st of August 2020, if the moratorium is not extended, still for the next classification of NPA, your outstanding as on February 29, 2020 or the period by which your account was overdue on February 29, 2020 shall not be taken into consideration. This has a very vital bearing on how the loan accounts would be classified post 31st August in case the moratorium is not extended. So please remember, the period of 90 days would be after the period of repayment, the period of repayment of those amounts which remained unpaid during the moratorium is up to 31st March 2021. So after 31st March 2021, this 90-day period would start. Let not anybody say that on 29 February 2020, your account was already overdue by 60 days. So now within 30 days we'll classify you as NPA. Similarly, for CC account, that particular period, which is the due date or past due, as is the word used in banking channels, past due of 60 days as on 29 February 2020 will be excluded from the status or the classification. Now there is one more circular dated 23rd of May by which moratorium got extended for 3 more months. I've already shared this with you, and then there is yes, even for the recovery of interest, this 3-month period has already been extended. And as I told you just now, the amount of interest due or unpaid interest for the period of moratorium, as well as the amount due under the heading of installments during the period of moratorium, will be converted into a FITL, funded interest term loan, and that will be payable by March 31, 2021. Let no banker demand from you all the outstanding dues from the very first day, which is from 1st of September. Let no banker demand the full amount due or part of the dues. Demand that if all the amount, all the overdues are converted into FITL, and then you get a sufficient period. My suggestion would be, these are Reserve Bank of India guidelines. If your honest assessment of your business position or your honest assessment of your business capability tells you that, okay, in the next 6 months, because because the problems of COVID have not completely gone away, I may not be able to service this. Don't sign on the dotted line. Request your banker, make a request, invert a letter saying that you require 1 more year for payment of this FITL. Don't be under an impression that a banker is going to do some kind of a favor to you by doing all this. Unless you go to the banker, unless an MSME owner goes to the banker and informs him of his financial difficulties, how would the banker be able to further communicate this to the authority, which is the Reserve Bank of India? So don't be afraid, write to your banker, tell your banker that, okay, 31st March 2021 does not look to be a date by which we will be able to service the loans again. Extend it by 6 more months, maybe you will get it, or maybe the Reserve Bank of India itself will come up with this. Now, these are broadly the aspects with respect to NPA classification you need to keep in your mind. Another aspect about which I spoke in my last talk also, but I'm repeating it shortly because it is important. Why it is important? Because the interest charged and recovered by the bank from the MSME borrowers are usually more than the agreed terms and conditions. So the first thing, when you find that your unit is unable to service the loans properly, the first thing is, please get your interest application audited from a competent chartered accountant. Take it from me, you'll find that there are many mistakes committed by the bank. The bankers are not doing it purposely. It creeps into the system. Why? Because from the year 2010, the interest rates have been falling. The fall in interest rate is announced by Reserve Bank of India. It is also announced by various PSBs. But the implementation of that particular date does not percolate to the village level branches or city level branches. That's why the higher rate of interest gets charged. So this is a very important suggestion. Please keep this in mind. Now, finally, within 2 minutes, I have only 2 to 3 minutes. I'll talk about the IBC and what are the changes in the IBC, because they don't affect you at this stage, but you should be aware of it. What are the changes? You should be aware of it. So on 24th of March 2020, the Government of India changed Section 4 of IBC, and the 1 lakh limit to initiate a CIRP process was increased to 1 crore rupees. So unless an outstanding is above 1 crore rupee, nobody will be able to initiate a CIRP proceeding under the IBC Act against your company. So this is a good relief. And the second one is the amendment in IBC has introduced Section 10A. What it says, what it does, it selectively suspends the applicability of Section 7, 9 and 10 of IBC for any default arising on or after 25/3/2020 for a period of 6 months or such further period not exceeding 1 year. It means that if any default has arisen with respect to any unit, including MSME unit, after 25/3/2020, nobody can sue you or nobody can take you to the insolvency court under Section 7, 9 or 10. 7 is for the bankers. Section 7 is suspended. It means the banker cannot take you. Section 9 is for your creditors, which are operational creditors, so they cannot take you. And Section 10 is the suo moto. You yourself also cannot go to the insolvency code for this. So these are the broad changes. IBC, in fact, gives you a breathing space as far as policy changes are concerned. Even NPA classification give you the NPA relaxation, the fresh notifications, everything gives you a breathing space, provided you know that there is a breathing space, provided you insist upon your banker that you be provided with the breathing space. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Advocate Manoj Harit. That was a wonderful presentation and a wonderful insight about how this insolvency process and the bank NPS that thing works. Just to update everybody, that just few minutes ago, the government has come out with a credit guarantee scheme for subordinate debt for MSMEs. And this scheme will operationalize about 20,000 crore distress asset fund. So it was tweeted, and the tweet says that the scheme would be applicable to all credit facilities sanctioned under the CGSSD for a maximum period of 10 years from the guarantee availment. That's 31st March 2021, whichever is earlier, or till the amount of 20,000 crore of guarantee amount is approved. So it's just an update.